Hi, I'm Bob Tabor with www.learnvisualstudio.net. In this module, I'm going to demonstrate how to control access to containers and blobs programmatically. You'll recall from several modules ago, we could set the security for a given container using a little drop down, or the three options. There was private, which means only the owner of the storage account could actually access that container and the blobs inside of it. The next step up was to make was public blob, which made the blob itself visible, but you could not get a listing of all blobs in a container. And then the third setting was the most open. You could read a list of blobs in the container and perform operations on the blob itself. Okay, so let's take a look at this code example that I've created. Very simple. A lot of this you're going to recognize. Here we're going to just get a container reference and then start working with a blob. I'm going to pop up a little menu that asks, what would you like to do to the specific container that we're going to work with here? Would you like to set it to blob, public container, or private? And so then based on that, we're going to set the blob container permissions to a new instance of this blob container permissions object, setting its public access equal to a value from this enumeration blob container public access type. We can set it to blob or container or off, which is the same as private, which is the default. And then since we have a reference to the container from earlier, like right here, now we can set the permissions for that container to that blob container permission object that we just created and set in the previous lines of code. Now, in order to make it interesting, we're going to upload a file. I've got a PNG file that I've been using throughout this series in that hero versus robot example. We're just going to upload that and to the container. And now what we're going to do is attempt to do two different things. We're going to try to download that blob, and we're going to try and get a list of all the blobs inside of the container. Now I'm using the URI of the blob in order to attempt to download it and to retrieve the list of blobs inside of a container. And I kind of note why I'm doing it this way is to simulate somebody other than the account owner attempting to work with the blob. We know that even if the permission is set to private, or rather off, that the account owner can access it. So accessing it using the client library would be unfair. In order to make this really a true example, we're going to create the URI and attempt to access the blob from the URI and see if those permissions really do work. And we'll do the same here with trying to access the container. Note that there's this extra little bit that we're going to pass along as a query string that we want to get a list of all the blobs inside of a container. So I give some references here to constructing the URI and what those query strings mean. So you'll definitely want to check that out and some of the other options that you have when creating that URI that you can pass in and attempt to work with blobs in that manner. All right, and then we just basically will either be able to display the list of blobs up in the container or not, and we'll get error messages or success messages based on both. So let's go ahead and run the application the first time. And the first time what I'm going to do is set the permission policy to private, and then you can see we attempt to access the blob, and it says permission is denied to access the blob, and here's the error. It's a 404 not found. So Azure just says, well, I don't even know what that file is. It's probably the most secure way to go about this. Instead of saying, yeah, there's a file here, but we're not going to let you access it. Then there might be some attempt to use nefarious means to access it. And so you can just avoid that altogether by saying, I don't even know what you're talking about. And the same thing is true with the second, although it looks like it's kind of run together here, but the permission denied to access the list of blobs in the container. Here's the error. Okay, another 404. All right, so now let's run the example again. This time we're going to only use public blob access. So in this case, we've successfully received the blob with the response status OK. However, we're still getting a permission denied to access the list of blobs in the container. All right. So now let's run it a third time. And this time we're going to select the most generous of all permissions, public container. And we get an OK status to receive the blob and OK status to receive the list of blobs. And then I print out the list of blobs. It happens to be in an XML format, and I'm lazy and I don't format it. But you can see each of the blobs. Here's the file name, soldier. It gives you the last modified date, the E tag, the content length, content type. Let's see, what else? And the lease status. That's interesting. We'll talk about leases here in a little bit. And at any rate, that's how you would programmatically set the permissions for a blob and for a container to be the same as what you would do if you were setting it up in the Azure portal. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful, and we're going to continue on in the very next module with more interesting blob stuff. We'll see you there. Thank you.